The Weird Casefiles of Paul Lionblood. Chapter 1. Ashes and Whispers. Erevos Prime was a city balanced on the knife edge between light and dark. Its towers rose like jagged teeth into the smog-streaked heavens, neon veins pulsing through steel and glass as if the metropolis itself were alive. Here, humanity had evolved in strange directions. Children of light wielding fire and storm, pyrokinetics and electrokinetics who bent the primal forces to their will. And in the shadows, another branch of humanity had taken root. The shadow humans, vampires and banshees born of dusk and silence, regal predators who thrived where the light faltered. It was in this fractured world, where treaties between noble houses kept fragile peace, that Paul Lionblood carved his reputation. A decorated soldier turned private investigator and mercenary, his office was a sanctuary of contradictions. Old parchment and smoke mingling with the hum of digital screens, tradition colliding with post-scarcity modernity. Paul leaned back in his chair, the neon glow painting his office in fractured colors. Outside, Erevos Prime pulsed like a living organism, its arteries of light weaving through the towers. Across from him sat Vera Duskveil, her pale hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white against the dim glow. Her eyes, silver pools rimmed with shadows, studied him with a mixture of desperation and suspicion. She had come to confess, but she had also come to test him. "I see the treaties burning," she whispered, her voice trembling like a candle flame in a draft. "I see banshees screaming over the ruins. My family laughs at me, but I know something is coming." Paul's eyes narrowed, the faint glow of fire behind them. He listened silent, while Nyx, his AI, muttered in his ear, sardonic as ever. "Oh, tragic vampire girl with visions of doom," Nyx sneered. "You're either going to marry her or die for her. Probably both." Vera's voice cracked as she described suitors. Humans begging her to turn them, lustful men offering wealth for immortality. None of them genuine. None brave. Without a consort to anchor her claims, she was dismissed, her warnings ignored. "I am alone. You are one of the most powerful men in this sector of Erevos Prime. I took your military background and commendations into account before approaching you, Paul Lionblood. Though I am known as a predator by race, I should let you know that the investigation I am asking of you requires a significant amount of danger," she said, her gaze flicking to his face, searching for cracks in his composure. Paul dismissed her gently with a tilt of his head, but her words lingered. And Vera noticed something. He did not flinch, did not mock, did not fear. His reputation was not smoke and mirrors, it was steel and fire. Her lips parted, and in a sudden surge of defiance, shadows coiled around her fingers. They writhed like serpents, stretching across the office floor, lunging toward him in a strike meant to test his mettle. Paul moved. In less than a heartbeat, he blurred from his chair, the neon glow bending around his speed. The shadows snapped at empty air, striking the wall with a hiss. He reappeared behind her, his jacket smoldering faintly in a wicked sizzle, his eyes calm. Vera froze. Her breath caught. She had expected arrogance, perhaps a boast. Instead, she found silence, an unshaken man who had simply avoided her attack as though it were nothing. Her gaze softened. She realized then, he would hear her out. He was not afraid. And that realization stirred something dangerous in her chest, a flicker of intrigue, a whisper of warmth against her cold, regal demeanor. She rose, her movements elegant, her pale skin gleaming like marble under the fractured neon. From her thin purse she withdrew a small device, placing it in his hand. Her fingertips lingered, cool against the heat of his pyrokinetic blood. "Contact me by tomorrow night with this device. You need only activate it and speak, and I will know where you are. You will speak directly to me, and me alone about this matter," said Lady Duskveil. Her voice was strict, commanding, but her eyes betrayed a subtle test. Would he recoil from her touch, or meet it with fire? Paul did not move. He let her linger, his warmth searing against her cool skin. For the briefest moment, her lips curved, not into a smile but into something sharper, something curious. She stepped elegantly around him, her eyes never leaving his face, and allowed herself the smallest indulgence. The thought that perhaps this man was different. Paul allowed her to see herself out, and stepped back over to his chair, listening to Nyx at his ear. "Whatever I think about her," Nyx muttered, "there has been a 72% increase in shadow human crime this week alone, risen from 42% the week before. If both factions are fighting over stolen artifacts, it could be connected to whatever doom Lady Vera's dreams have predicted." Paul leaned back, the device chill in his hand, the cold of her touch lingering longer than he cared to admit, almost like he was remembering her perfume. Not too many cold spots in his life, and even fewer women that looked like that. His brain pulled away from her, Paul decided to call it a night. He would check out a more detailed perspective with a full readout of Nyx's research first thing in the morning, to at least substantiate Lady Duskvale's claims. Outside, Erivo's prime pulsed on, a city of light and shadow, and the war between banshee and vampire houses loomed closer with every heartbeat. When Paul stepped into the night, the lights and the open air reminded him briefly of the battlefield, of wars fought in deserts, in the sky, in space stations and star palaces, where alien tyrants, dark gods, and blood traders tried and failed to conquer or destroy humanity. He thought of this impending doom and realized this would be no different. But then Paul walked through the silence and realized it for what it was: absolutely silent, impossible in Sector 3, and so close to the spaceport. The city's hum was broken by shrieks. Banshees descended like shadows torn from the sky, claws slicing through the neon haze. One lunged first, talons gleaming. Paul sidestepped, his fist igniting in a burst of flame, and drove a blazing punch through its chest. The creature shrieked, collapsing into ash. Two more screamed in unison, sonic waves rattling the street and shattering glass. Paul staggered, ears ringing, but Kale arrived, his cousin, molten blood steaming and glowing from his arms. He magnetized shards of steel from a neon sign and hurled them like spears, impaling the banshees mid-scream, silencing their voices. From above, Darius dropped like a comet of fury. Thermal blasts erupted from his hands, exploding banshees mid-air. Their shrieks ended in bursts of fire, raining ash across the street. The fight was chaos, banshees clawing, Lionbloods burning. Paul moved like a flame-forged speedster, weaving through attacks, his jacket smoldering but never burning. His fists struck a flame like matches, each dealing a melting blow in a flare of incandescent rage. Nyx quipped in his ear, sharp as ever. "Oh, look at you three. Family barbecue night, but with banshees instead of burgers." The banshees regrouped, circling like vultures. Paul blurred forward, his speed a streak of fire. One clawed at him, but he twisted, his flaming elbow smashing its jaw. The creature disintegrating in sparks. Another dove at his back, but Kale intercepted, molten arms wrapping around the beast. Steel shards magnetized to his skin, piercing the banshee until it dissolved. Two more tried to flank them. Darius raised his hands, unleashing twin thermal blasts. The banshees ignited mid-flight, their bodies scattering like burning paper. Their screams grew louder, sonic waves shaking the ground. Paul staggered, but Kale slammed his molten fists into the pavement, magnetizing debris into a shield. The waves shattered against it. Paul darted forward, fists blazing, striking in rapid succession. 1, 2, 3, each banshee collapsing into ash. Above, Darius soared, raining fire like a storm, his blasts turning banshee wings into cinders. Nyx laughed again. "Look at you three. The Lionblood boys, making a mess of the city. Someone call the janitor." When the last banshee fell, Paul stood among the ashes. His family clasped his shoulder, their breaths heavy, their bodies scorched but unbroken. Kale grinned, molten blood cooling on his arms. "We've got your back, cousin. Always." Darius chuckled, brushing ash from his jacket. "But let's be honest, we're not half the fire our patriarch is." Paul smirked, the faint glow of flame in his eyes. "No one is." They laughed together, a rare moment of levity amid the ruins. The patriarch of the Lionblood estate was a legend, a force beyond reckoning. Compared to him, they were sparks in the wind. But together, they burned bright enough to survive. Paul looked at the ashes, at the ruined street, the incoming authorities, always too late in times of open warfare, and at the faint glow of Erivo's prime beyond. Vera's words lingered in his mind, the treaties burning, the banshees screaming. He thought of her silver eyes, her trembling voice, her shadows striking at him in desperation. He thought of her realization that he was not afraid, and he decided then he would take Vera's case. Chapter 2 Bloodheart Blues. The bond begins. The warehouse loomed before them like a mausoleum, its walls scarred with graffiti and time, its steel doors breathing out the faint stench of rust and corruption. Erivos Prime's neon veins flickered across the industrial district, painting fractured colors across the cracked pavement. The hum of the city was distant here, muffled by the silence of forgotten machinery and the weight of secrets buried beneath. Paul Lionblood moved with the ease of a predator, his steps measured, unhurried, his eyes burning faintly in the dark. He was a man forged in fire, his presence steady and unshaken. Beside him Vera Duskveil glided like a wraith, her pale skin gleaming under the fractured light, her silver eyes rimmed with shadows. She carried herself with regal precision, every movement deliberate, every breath a quiet reminder of her lineage. Together they were light and shadow, fire and frost, bound by necessity and something neither dared name. The silence stretched between them, heavy yet charged. Vera's gaze lingered on Paul, studying the way he walked. Most men flinched under her presence, their hearts racing, their eyes betraying fear. Paul did not. His composure was steel, his fire unyielding. "You're not afraid of me," she whispered, her voice low, almost testing, as if daring him to falter. Paul glanced at her, his expression calm, his tone steady. "I've burned worse things than fear." The word struck her like a blade. Her empathic senses reached out, brushing against the edges of his soul. She felt the heat of his memories, flashes of battles fought, losses endured, the weight of family legacy pressing against his shoulders, and an image of his father and cousin at his shoulder smiling, laughing, surviving. His fire was not just literal. It was the essence of him, a furnace of resilience and rage. Her cold soul shivered. She had lived centuries in shadow, untouched by warmth, her existence defined by silence and hunger. Yet here was a man whose very blood burned, whose emotions glowed like embers in the dark. She felt herself drawn to it, her darkness calling to his light. Paul knew nothing of it. He simply walked, scanning for threats, his mind focused on the mission. But Vera's heart twisted. Slowly, painfully, she realized that he was perfect for her in every way. She was almost angry with Nyx. A sudden scrape of boots shattered the silence. For guards emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, eyes sharp with suspicion. Their movements were quick, but not quick enough. Paul moved first. His fist ignited, a flare of fire cutting through the dark. He struck the nearest guard in the chest, the man collapsing before he could cry out, his body crumbling into ash. Vera glided forward, her shadows coiling like serpents. They lashed out, wrapping around the second guard's throat, silencing him in a single elegant motion. His eyes widened in terror before the darkness consumed him. The third lunged, blade flashing in the dim light. Paul twisted, his jacket smoldering as he caught the strike, then drove a flaming elbow into the man's jaw. Bone shattered and the guard fell, ash scattering across the floor. The last raised his weapon, desperation flickering in his eyes. But Vera was already there. Her pale hand brushed his cheek, shadows piercing his mind. He crumpled silently, his scream swallowed by the void. For guards down, no alarm raised. The silence returned, heavier than before. Paul pulled a small device from his coat, snapping quick pictures of the relics scattered across crates and shelves. Temple idols, laboratory instruments, noble heirlooms. Vera leaned close, her silver eyes scanning the chaos, her shadows curling faintly at her fingertips. Together, they transmitted fragments of data to the authorities, sending coordinates, images, and coded warnings. Nyx's voice crackled in Paul's ear, dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, lovely. You two make a great couple, romance, murder, and evidence collection. Truly inspirational." Vera's lips curved faintly, her gaze flicking toward Paul. "Your companion is insufferable." Paul smirked. "You get used to him." They pressed forward, deeper into the warehouse. A hidden stairwell led them down into a vast underground pavilion. The air was heavy, thick with dust and corruption. Neon strips flickered overhead, casting fractured light across endless rows of stolen artifacts. Statues, weapons, scrolls, machines, all piled in chaotic reverence to theft and obsession. The space was immense, a cathedral of desecration. Relics stolen from temples, laboratories, and noble estates lay scattered in chaotic piles, their power twisted, their histories desecrated. Vera's shadows curled tighter at her fingertips, her voice sharp. This is no mere hoard. It is a sanctuary for zealots, a place where bloodlines are rewritten and destinies corrupted. Paul's eyes burned faintly, scanning the expanse. I don't even want to know what they need all this for. The tension between them sharpened, unspoken but undeniable, as they stood together at the threshold of the zealot's domain, light and shadow bound by necessity, and perhaps by something more. Vera's gaze lingered on him again, her cold soul shivering at the warmth she felt radiating from his presence. She had lived centuries untouched by fire, but here in the heart of corruption, she found herself drawn to a man whose blood burned brighter than any flame. Paul moved forward, his steps steady, his eyes unyielding. Vera followed, her shadows trailing like whispers of night. Together they descended into the pavilion, their bond beginning in silence, forged in fire and shadow, destined to burn against the darkness of the bloodright accord for now, but soon to burn against each other. The halls of the warehouse stretched endlessly, lined with crates and relics stolen from temples, laboratories, and noble estates. Paul moved with steady precision, snapping pictures, cataloging evidence, sending fragments of data to the authorities with each step. His focus was absolute, his firelit eyes scanning every shadow for threat or clue. Vera walked beside him, her presence no longer a looming danger but something colder, quieter, an anchor in the silence. They paused near a relic, a shattered harp, its strings torn, its wood splintered as though it had screamed itself apart. The broken instrument seemed to hum faintly with the residue of rituals, a ghost of music lost to corruption. Vera stood closer now, her silver eyes fixed on him. The tension between them sharpened, unspoken but undeniable. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, the steady pulse of his fire, and it gnawed at her restraint. I want to bite you, she confessed softly, her voice trembling with both desire and fear. The words slipped out like a blade drawn in the dark, sharp and dangerous, yet vulnerable. Paul raised an eyebrow, his lips curving faintly. That would be unwise. His tone was calm, unshaken, as if her confession were nothing more than another puzzle piece in the case. Nick snorted in his ear, dripping with sarcasm. Oh, fantastic. Vampire pillow talk. Don't mind me, I'll just mute myself while you two flirt. Honestly, Paul, you attract the strangest women. Vera laughed. A sound brighter than shadow, a sound she had not made in years. It startled her as much as it startled him, a flicker of warmth breaking through centuries of cold silence. Paul's calmness disarmed her, his lack of fear made her bold. She wanted to taste his fire, to feel it burn against her cold soul, to know if his flame could sear the darkness that had defined her existence. Paul said nothing more. He simply lifted his device again, snapping another picture of the shattered harp, sending another coded message to the authorities. His silence was not rejection, it was steadiness, a refusal to be shaken. And that steadiness was what drew her closer, what made her confession linger in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. As they examined the relics, the communication device flickered to life. A holographic projection shimmered, revealing the face of Lord Vathar Draimholt, vampire noble of Erivo's prime, and one of the richest and reclusive men in the world. His eyes gleamed with treachery, his smile sharp, his voice dripping with disdain. Lionblood, Vathar drawled. And the Duskvale girl. How quaint. You meddle in affairs beyond your reach. Paul's eyes narrowed, flames flickering faintly in their depths. You're feeding the zealots. Vathar chuckled, the sound low and venomous. Feeding? No. Guiding. The old order is dying, Lionblood. The zealots are the future. The accord is the future. And the blood harp will sing their victory. Vera's shadows writhed at her fingertips, her voice cold as steel. You betray your kind. Vathar's smile widened. I betray weakness. And you, dear Vera, are weak. The transmission snapped off, leaving silence heavy in the air. Paul clenched his fists, fire simmering beneath his skin. Vera's gaze lingered on him, her empathic senses brushing against his anger, his determination. She felt his memories, his father's voice, the weight of legacy, the fire that refused to die. Her soul ached. He was perfect. But the silence did not last. From the shadows of the pavilion, figures began to emerge, replicates of Lord Vathar, conjured from shadow and malice. Each bore his face, his sneer, his aristocratic cruelty. They moved with predatory grace, blades of darkness forming in their hands, eyes gleaming with hunger. Paul's fire flared instantly. Replicates. The first lunged, its blade slicing through the air. Paul twisted, his fist igniting in a burst of flame, driving into its chest. The shadow replica shrieked, dissolving into smoke and ash. Another came from behind, its claws slashing. Vera's shadows coiled like serpents, intercepting the strike. She pulled the replica into her embrace of darkness, crushing it until it shattered into fragments of void. Two more advanced together, blades raised. Paul blurred forward, his speed a streak of fire. His flaming elbow smashed into one's jaw, scattering it into sparks, while his other fist struck the second in the chest, incinerating it. But more emerged, circling them like vultures. Vera's silver eyes glowed, her shadows lashing outward in elegant arcs, slicing through replicas with regal precision. Paul moved beside her, his fire burning hotter, his strikes precise, each blow a flare of fury. Together they fought in silence, light and shadow weaving into a deadly rhythm. The pavilion shook with the clash, flames roaring, shadows writhing, replicas shrieking as they were torn apart. Ash rained across the relics, the stolen artifacts glowing faintly under the storm of destruction. And then it happened, a storm of shadows erupted. One of the relics responded to the dark energy, and formed into a swirling vortex of darkness that inhaled the air around it, pulling in thousands of rows of other relics in an unstable tornado of darkness and deathly winds. Paul and Vera leaped back as the tornado hit critical mass, and the place was blown to smithereens halfway through the reinforced wall and towering ceiling in a soundless, collapsing implosion. All at once, when silence fell, the battle was renewed, and Vera jumped and struck at the two standing shadow replicates while Paul ripped a stream of flame along the last flank of them, emerging from the rubble near of the shadow-scorched wall. Finally, the last replica fell, its body collapsing into smoke. The silence returned, broken only by the hiss of Paul's smoldering jacket and the whisper of Vera's shadows fading back into her skin. The device flickered again. Vathar's face reappeared, his smile sharper than before. "Impressive," he drawled. "But futile. You cannot kill shadows, Lionblood. You cannot burn what is already dead. The zealots will rise and humanity will fall. Shadow humans will inherit the ashes, and I will lead them." Paul's eyes burned, his voice low and steady. "You're wrong. You've already lost." Vera's gaze locked on Vathar's projection, her voice cold as the grave. "You stand against all humans. Against me. That is your mistake." Vathar's laughter echoed through the chamber, cruel and resonant. "We shall see, Lady Duskvale. We shall see." The transmission ended once more, leaving Paul and Vera standing among the ruins of battle, their bond sharpened by fire and shadow, their resolve unbroken. The silence shattered. Zealots poured from the shadows, their bodies twisted by genetic augmentation. Claws gleamed, eyes burned with fanatic light, their movements jerky and unnatural, as though their very blood rebelled against the shape it had been forced into. Paul ignited instantly, his fists blazing, striking with soldier's precision. Each punch was a flare, each movement a dance of fire. He moved like a weapon honed by war. His flames incinerated the zealots with brutal efficiency. Beside him Vera spun, shadows coiling into blades. Her movements were elegant, lethal, dealing near instant death with cold grace. Silver eyes glowed, her pale, chiseled body radiated with a shadow-clad aura that was dark and beautiful as she cut them down. Where Paul was fury, she was silence. Where he burned, she bled shadows. Nyx's voice crackled in Paul's ear, sardonic but sharp. "Oh, look at you two. Fire and shadow, dancing through zealots like it's prom night. I should sell tickets. But for the record, these zealots aren't just muscle, they're running on blood rewrite protocols. Watch their speed. They'll adapt mid-fight." Paul deflected a plasma shot with a burst of flame, the energy scattering harmlessly across the steel walls. Vera's bladed shadow constructs followed through, severing the weapon in a single strike, her precision flawless. The battle raged. Zealots screamed, their claws tearing at steel, their bodies convulsing with unstable power. Paul burned, Vera sliced, their movements weaving together in deadly harmony. Nyx muttered again, his tone half mocking, half informative. Notice the coordination? They're not just charging blindly. Someone's feeding them tactical overlays. Probably Vathar's little toy network. Cut enough of them down, and you'll see the lag in their movements. Paul blurred forward, his speed a streak of fire. His fists struck with precision, igniting zealots one by one. His jacket smoldered, his eyes burned. Vera's shadows coiled around her, forming shields against plasma fire. She moved with elegance, her blades slicing through zealots that skittered along the ceiling, laces of shadow echoing like a hymn of death along the walls. Nyx sighed theatrically. Oh, this is adorable. You two should get matching uniforms. Fire Shadow Chic. Maybe throw in a logo, something like Lionblood and Duskvale. We kill zealots so you don't have to. The zealots faltered, retreating into a sealed chamber. The reinforced walls slammed shut behind them, relics scattered across the floor. Smoke and blood thickened the air. Paul cursed under his breath, flames flaring hotter. They're trying to box us in. Nyx's tone sharpened. Correct. Closed environment tactics. They'll try to overwhelm you with numbers, force you into exhaustion. Watch for choke points. Those relic piles aren't just junk, they're cover. Paul surged forward, his fists blazing, igniting zealots one by one. His strikes were surgical, each blow a flare of incandescent rage. Vera moved beside him, shadows forming shields against plasma fire, blades slicing through zealots and armor. Her shadow power shimmered and echoed, cold and beautiful, as she cut them down. Nyx's commentary continued, weaving between sarcasm and analysis. Efficiency rating, 87%. Not bad. But Vera, you're overextending on the left flank. Paul, your jacket's about to combust again. Honestly, you two fight like you're auditioning for a superhero movie. Fire, shadow, blood, betrayal, and shame. Like the shame in that zealot's eyes as he died. He never listened to his mother. He should have finished school. The chamber shook with the clash, as Vera actually laughed while dancing between the last few remaining members of the Bloodright Accord. Zealots fell, their bodies collapsing into ash and smoke. But in the chaos, a shriek split the air. Morrigan Veilshriek emerged from the shadows, her banshee wings shimmering, her voice rattling the chamber with a piercing cry. She moved with a razor whisper, seizing the blood harp from its pedestal. Its strings glowed faintly, pulsing with stolen power. Nyx's voice snapped, sharp and urgent. Double agent. Veilshriek's been playing both sides. That harp isn't just symbolic. It's a resonance weapon. If she tunes it, she can amplify banshee shrieks across the city. You let her leave, Erivo's prime becomes a graveyard. Paul cursed, flames flaring, but Morrigan vanished into the night, her shriek echoing long after she was gone. The battle ended. The zealots lay in ruins, their bodies scattered among relics and ash. Paul's fire dimmed, his fists cooling, his jacket scorched but intact. Vera's shadows and wings lightly receded, her silver eyes softening as she stepped closer. One of her wings possessively touched and disapprovingly examined a shrinking wound at his neck after he pulled a piece of metal from the side of his jugular. It slithered away instantly as Vera realized what she was doing, and her veins yearned for the bit of blood. When Paul tossed the offending sliver of metal aside, she watched as it clanged along the ground. She brushed his arm lightly, her touch cold against his warmth. Her empathic senses reached out, feeling his exhaustion, his determination, his fire. She felt him, but he did not feel her. His abilities did not work the same way hers did. Nyx broke the silence, his tone quieter now, almost reflective. You know, Paul, I've run the numbers. Statistically, you shouldn't have survived half the fights you've been in, but you do. And now you've got her at your side. Fire and shadow. Maybe that's the only equation that works. Paul said nothing. He simply scanned the ruins, his mind already on the Accord zealot that escaped. Chapter 3. The cacophony rises. Vera Duskvale returned to her ancestral estate, its towering spires clawing at the sky like obsidian fingers. The council chamber was alive with voices, her advisors, nobles draped in velvet and arrogance, all scrambling to explain themselves. They had laughed at her once. They had dismissed her visions of treaties burning, banshees screaming, and a dark god looming over the world. They had called her dramatic, unstable, a girl lost in shadows. Now, after the blood harp's theft and the zealot's rise, they were apologizing. "My lady, we misjudged. We did not see the signs. The shadow humans, their souls are unraveling. You were right." Vera sat in silence, her silver eyes cold. Their words washed over her like meaningless echoes. She had no time for their regret. She rose, her presence commanding, shadows coiling faintly around her. She stepped to the council's stand, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "I declare war on the banshees," she said. "No more whispers. No more denial. The Duskvale House will stand against them, and I will lead." The chamber fell silent. No one dared challenge her. Later, in the depths of the estate, Vera descended into the interrogation hall. The air was heavy with iron and shadow, the walls lined with chains and relics of judgment. There, bound to a chair of black steel, sat Lady Morrigan Veilshriek. Her banshee wings were torn, her voice hoarse from shrieks that had been silenced by torture. She had delivered the blood harp to Lord Vathar Draimholt and his wife Selene, only to be betrayed by Selene herself. Narrowly escaping with her life, she had been caught on the run by Duskvale spies, broken, and now given to Vera for the final reckoning. Vera approached, her steps slow, deliberate. Shadows curled at her fingertips, whispering promises of pain. Morrigan lifted her head, silver hair matted with blood, her eyes hollow but defiant. "You've already taken everything from me," Morrigan rasped. "What more do you want?" Vera's voice was calm, cold, terrifying in its restraint. "Truth. Nothing else." Morrigan laughed weakly, a sound like glass breaking. "Truth is poison. Vathar and Selene are not building a future. They are unmaking one. The harp was never meant to sing for banshees alone. It is tuned to unravel bloodlines, to strip humanity of its fire and shadow alike. They want silence. Eternal silence, suffocating silence through unending sound." Vera's silver eyes narrowed, her shadows tightening around Morrigan's throat just enough to remind her of the cost of lies. "Names. Places. Every thread you know." Morrigan trembled, her defiance cracking. "Vathar hides in the catacombs beneath the old Draimholt Manor. Selene commands the zealots from the old amphitheater, where the harp will be played. They are gathering artifacts, weaving them into a ritual that will drown Erivo's prime in screams. That is all I know. I swear it. What were you to gain in all this? Deliverance. I would not be exterminated like everything else," replied Morrigan simply. Vera studied her, her empathic senses brushing against the edges of Morrigan's soul. She felt the truth in her words, the terror that clung to them. There was nothing more to be gained. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper colder than death. "You betrayed me. You betrayed your kind. And now you betray them. That is the only truth you leave behind." Morrigan's eyes widened, a flicker of fear breaking through her hollow defiance. "Please." The shadows tightened. Silence fell. Lady Morrigan Veilshriek's body slumped, her final breath stolen by the darkness. Vera stood tall, her silver eyes gleaming, her presence regal and unshaken. She had learned what she needed. She had silenced a traitor. And she had proven finally that she was aligned with the right side of things. The war had begun, and Vera Duskvale would lead it. The trail led them to Lord Vathar Draimholt and his banshee vampire wife Selene. Their estate loomed like a fortress, its gates dripping with iron, its halls echoing with shrieks that seemed to bleed from the walls themselves. The night was heavy, the air charged with the promise of violence. None of the neon veins of the city skies laced the air above. Only the lazily floating fortresses and space stations of the upper nobility floated in the distance between the clouds and beyond. Paul Lionblood arrived with Vera Duskvale, Kale, and Darius. Together they stood before the gates, shadows and fire poised to strike. The first clash came without warning. Banshee guards descended from the ramparts, their shrieks slicing through the night. Paul ignited instantly, flames roaring around him as he tore through the attackers. His fists struck with soldier's precision, each blow a flare of incandescent rage. The banshees dissolved into ash beneath his fury, their cries silenced in bursts of fire. Vera moved beside him, her fury elegant and cold. Shadows wrapped her like armor, blades flashing as she cut down traitorous vampires who rushed from the estate halls. Her movements were beautiful as she carved through them. Cale's magnetism surged. He ripped the iron gates from the ground, twisting them into jagged spears. With a roar, he hurled them into the banshee ranks. The shrieks turned to screams as steel impaled them, their bodies collapsing into ash. Above, Darius descended like a storm. Thermal bombs exploded from his hands, scattering banshee shrieks into silence. His blasts lit the night, wings turning to cinders as the air filled with fire and smoke. Nyx's voice cut through the chaos, sardonic but sharp. "Lovely entrance, gentlemen. But brace yourselves. Motion sensors are lighting up across the estate. You've got another wave inbound, heavier than the first. And Paul, your jacket's smoldering again. Try not to combust before we reach the amphitheater." Paul smirked faintly, his eyes burning. Cale laughed, molten blood steaming in his arms. The battle surged deeper into the estate. Banshees poured from the halls, vampires lunged from the shadows. Paul blurred forward, his fists blazing, blasting and burning through dark forms that crushed to ash under his power. Vera's shadows coiled into shields, intercepting plasma fire, then lashed outward to slice through enemies with cold grace. Cale magnetized debris from shattered walls, hurling steel shards like a storm. Darius soared above, raining fire down in arcs that lit the night. Nyx's commentary threaded through the fight, half mocking, half informative. "Security grid's still active. I'm filtering inputs now, give me 30 seconds. Shutting down the Eastern Wing's defenses, rerouting power from the amphitheater. Oh, and by the way, Celine's voice signature just pinged. She's moving toward the harp chamber. If you don't hurry, she'll have the whole place singing banshee lullabies before you get there." Paul struck another banshee, shoving his head into a wall, his flame scattering its body into ash. Vera jumped over him, her hand lightly grasping at his shoulder as she kicked another vampire in the face as she lunged, crushing her skull and sending her to the ground wrapped in shadows that ate her into nothingness. "Then shut it down faster," they both said in unison. Nyx chuckled. "You're welcome to try coding mid-fight, but I'll handle the systems. You just keep punching things until they stop screaming." The cousins fought with relentless fury. Cale used metal shards from fallen debris and blades, shaping it into jagged weapons. Darius hurled thermal blasts that shook the estate foundations. Paul moved like a flame-forged predator, weaving through attacks, his fists blazing. Vera was a wraith beside him, staying near, always near to keep him safe and watch him fight. The full pleasure and lust of battle completely flooding her cold veins as they tore up another hallway, clearing their path to the far side of the old estate. Together they carved a path through their goal. The shrieks faded, the halls filled with ash and silence. Nyx's voice returned, sharper now. "Systems down. I've killed the alarms, opened the western corridor, and locked Celine out of her own amphitheater. You've got a clear path, but don't celebrate yet. The harp chamber is crawling with zealots, and Vaynar's signature just spiked. He knows you're here." Paul's eyes burned, his voice steady. "Then we finish this." Vera's silver gaze lingered on him, her shadows curling tighter as he subtly shifted over to him to whisper in his ear. "I want to bite you," she said calmly, only to step back away from him and float along the end of the hall, like a young girl revealing her crush to a boy. Finally, Paul understood what her words meant. She liked him, and she wanted him to know it. She had also known how dense he was, and had not taken offense to his ignorance earlier. He glared back at his family, who were too occupied fighting and working out their violent impulses to realize they were being left behind. Paul and Vera pressed forward, their bond finally spoken and acknowledged, their path lit by Nyx's sardonic guidance. The estate loomed around them, its halls dripping with blood and betrayal, its amphitheater waiting like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. The amphitheater loomed ahead, its walls wrapped in a barrier of living shadow. Cale and Darius struck at it with fire and steel, but the barrier held, swallowing their attacks like smoke in the wind. They cursed, their fury useless against the veil. Paul stepped forward, his flames burning hotter, but even his fire faltered against the wall of darkness. It was Vera who moved closer, her silver eyes gleaming, her shadows curling like wings. She reached for him, her pale hand brushing his arm. "They cannot pass," she whispered. "But you can with me." Before he could answer, her wings unfurled, vast and regal, shadows enveloping him in their embrace. He felt her coldness wrap around his fire, felt the strange union of light and dark. She pulled him through, and together they slipped into the barrier, vanishing from the sight of the others. Inside, the world shifted. The deeper sanctum was frozen in time. Flames hung motionless in sconces, dust suspended in the air. Even the echo of shrieks caught mid-sound. Paul and Vera stood alone in a prison where time itself had stopped. For the first time, silence pressed between them. No battle, no shrieks, no fire or shadow. Only the weight of what they had carried together. Vera's voice trembled, though her posture remained regal. "We fight as though we have always fought together. Yet we never did, not in war, not against each other. And still, we are perfect in battle." Paul's eyes burned faintly, his tone calm. "Maybe we were meant to be." Her gaze fell on him, shadows flickering at her fingertips. Shakily she reached for his hand and pulled his attention right to her pale face. "I want to bite you," she confessed, the words sharp with desire and fear. Paul's lips curved faintly. "Then do it." She hesitated, her cold soul shivering. To drain him would be to destroy him, and yet his fire called to her darkness. Slowly, she leaned in, her fangs brushing his skin. She bit, shadows trembling as his blood touched her lips. She expected weakness, collapse, death. Instead, she felt his lion blood replenish itself endlessly, a loop of fire and renewal. The more she drank, the more his blood burned back into existence, a cycle without end. Her silver eyes widened, her soul aching with realization. He was truly perfect for her in every way. When she pulled back, her lips stained with fire, she whispered, "I could drink forever." Paul's hand brushed her cheek, his warmth searing against her cold skin. "Then what about me?" Her breath caught. Shadows coiled around them, wings folding tighter. And there, in the frozen sanctum, they gave themselves to each other. Fire and shadow entwined, their bond sealed not in battle but in love. The prison shuddered. Time cracked. The frozen dust fell. Flames flickered, sound returned. Freed from the temporal trap, they stood together, stronger than before, their bond unbreakable. Hand in hand, they moved forward, shadows and fire weaving into one. The sanctum opened into the heart of the amphitheater, where Celine and Vathar awaited, the blood harp glowing between them. The amphitheater was alive with shadow and shrieks, its walls trembling as Paul and Vera faced Lord Vathar Draimholt and his banshee vampire wife Celine. The nobles moved with predatory grace, their power amplified by the blood harp that pulsed at the center of the chamber. Paul's flames roared as he struck, his fists blazing a stream of fight at them both, but Vathar's shadows multiplied, replicas lunging from every angle. Vera's wings unfurled, her silver eyes glowing as she cut through Celine's illusions. Yet even she faltered under the banshee's shrieks that bent the air and fractured her senses. Together they fought, fire and shadow entwined, but the nobles pressed harder, their tricks relentless, their blinding tactics forcing Paul to stumble and Vera to reel. Nyx's voice crackled in Paul's ear, sharp with urgency. "They're feeding off the harp. Every strike you land, it replenishes them. Break their rhythm, or you'll drown in their tricks and tactics." Paul gritted his teeth, his fire burning hotter. "Then we fight together." Vera's shadows coiled tighter, her voice cold and resolute. "Yes, together." They surged forward, their movements weaving into harmony, fire burning through illusions, shadow slicing through shrieks. For a moment, the nobles faltered, their tricks unraveling. But then Vathar's smile widened, blood dripping from his lips, and Celine's laughter rose shrill and triumphant. "We are not meant to win," she cried. "We are meant to awaken." Their bodies dissolved into shadow and sound, their essence pouring into the harp. The strings glowed, pulsing with stolen bloodlines, and the song rose into a scream that shattered stone. The Jormungand sound monger awakened, its voice 1,000 knives, its presence a storm of despair. Paul and Vera were hurled aside, their bodies scorched, their bonds straining against the god's scream. Nyx's voice cracked, panicked for once. This isn't just a weapon. It's a god. The harp was tuned to awaken it. You can't fight this. Not here. Not now. The soundmonger rose, its form vast and terrible, its scream splitting the sky. Paul staggered, his jacket smoldering as it took the brunt of the force from the raging audiokinetic scourge, his eyes wide. Vera's wings wrapped around him, shadows shielding them, but even her power faltered against the god's fury. The amphitheater shook, the heavens themselves trembling. Then the sky tore open. From orbit, a comet blazed across the night, descending like judgment incarnate. Ser Lionblood fell, his nuclear aura igniting the night sky. His flames were not mortal fire, they were starbursts, annihilation, the fury of suns condensed into a man. He struck the ground with the force of a falling star, his presence overwhelming, his fire burning brighter than the god's scream. Ser stood before the soundmonger, his eyes calm, his voice resonant. You were born of stolen blood and false song. Do you understand what you are? The god shrieked, its voice a cacophony of knives, but it did not speak. Ser's gaze narrowed, his flames flaring higher. I would have given you a chance to answer, to prove you were more than a scream. But you are silence wrapped in noise. You are nothing. The soundmonger lunged, its scream tearing through the amphitheater, but Ser's fire rose to meet it. His flames consumed the sound, burning through the god's voice, scattering its resonance into ash. The creature writhed, its body collapsing into shadow, but Ser pressed harder, his nuclear pyrokinesis igniting the sky. He struck again, his fire blasting the god into orbit, a starburst of annihilation that lit the heavens. The soundmonger shrieked one final time, its voice fading into silence as Ser's flames consumed it utterly. The world shook. The god was gone. Paul rose slowly, his jacket smoldering, his eyes wide with awe. I'm not half the man my father is, he whispered, but this time with reverence. Nyx chuckled, his voice softer now. Yeah, well, half of Ser is still more than most gods. Don't beat yourself up. Vera's silver eyes lingered on Paul, her shadows curling tighter. She felt his reverence for the man who had saved them all. Her soul ached. He was perfect. Together they stood in the ruins of the amphitheater, fire and shadow entwined, their bond unbroken. The nobles were gone, the harp silenced, the god destroyed. And above them, Ser Lionblood burned like a sun, his presence a reminder of the legacy they carried. The war was not over, but the world had been saved for now. Epilogue, Ashes and Firelight. Ash drifted through the ruins of the amphitheater like snow, settling on broken stone and shattered relics. Paul and Vera stood together, hands clasped, their silhouettes framed by the fading glow of Ser Lionblood's fire. The elder's flames dimmed, his voice carrying a rare softness. Your mother will be expecting grandchildren, Ser said, a faint smile breaking through his stern demeanor. Vera's breath caught. For centuries she had been cold, untouchable, a creature of shadow. Yet now, surprising herself, she admitted softly, I am willing. Nyx snorted in Paul's ear, unable to resist. Oh, fantastic. A vampire daughter-in-law. I'll start designing the wedding invitations in blood-red font. Paul rolled his eyes, but Vera laughed, a sound brighter than shadow, brighter than fire. Later, when the echoes of battle had faded and the ruins lay silent, Vera leaned closer to Paul. Her silver eyes studied him, her empathic senses brushing against his soul. You know what I love about you? She whispered. You don't care that I am a creature of darkness, a shadow human. You see me as a woman, not a monster. Paul's gaze was steady, his voice calm. That's true. When you came to me, I saw a girl in trouble, not a predator, not a monster. Her breath trembled, shadows curling faintly at her lips. I want to bite you. Nyx groaned, his sarcasm sharp even in the quiet. Oh, here we go again. Vampire Romance Hour, Round 3. Someone get me garlic popcorn. Paul ignored him, his eyes never leaving Vera's. She laughed again, brighter than shadow, brighter than fire. The war was over. The banshees scattered, the god destroyed. Vera returned to her estate, But she no longer stood alone. She stood with Paul. Together they walked through Erivo's prime, fought side by side, and endured Nyx's endless commentary. Her cold soul warmed, her shadows softened, and for the first time in centuries she felt whole. In the aftermath of the final battle, Vera declared her love, not with hesitation but with assurance. "I want to bite you," she whispered again, smiling. "And I want you to know, I am happy, because you see me as a woman. And that is enough." Paul's eyes burned softly. He said nothing more, only clasped her hand, his warmth searing against her cool skin. Nyx muttered one last time, his voice fading into the night. "Oh clueless Paul, you've got a vampire in love with you, and you don't even realize it. This is going to be fun." Vera laughed, her voice carrying across the ruins, brighter than shadow, brighter than fire. And in that moment, she knew whatever battles lay ahead, whatever darkness rose again, she would never face it alone.